do that, where's the best place for people to find you and support you right now? Since you're stateside, is it Rumble?
The La Quinta Inn in Melbourne.
Yeah, I'm on Rumble. I have a Rumble channel. My show's in Portuguese on Rumble, but the U.S. audience can follow me on X at Rio P. Figueiredo, which is my last name. I know it's hard to follow. That's the way it is.
Yeah.
At Rio P. Figueiredo, I'm on X, and most of my posts are in English, so they can follow me there. My Rumble channel is still in Portuguese, although Rumble, as you properly said, is not banned in Brazil. They decided to not comply to the rules, the crazy orders by Alexandre de Moraes, and so they closed Rumble and Locals, by the way, as well. Both are closed to Brazilian audience if you're accessing Brazilian IP.
I wanted to ask you, how do you? What are your thoughts on that? Because I know that obviously that's a significant portion of your business, how you make a living. But I would imagine that on moral grounds, you're supportive of them, rebelling against the Brazilian government. But what's your overall feeling on that? That Brazilian fans can't watch you unless they maybe have a VPN.
Well, it hurt me tremendously, but I actually talked to them. They were courteous enough to let me know what they were going to do, and I fully support it because, like Elon Musk said, moral principles are more important than profit, and that was the basis. All this started when I tweeted to Elon Musk saying, "Well, you're saying all these rules are illegal, so why comply?" Locals and Rumble didn't. And that's when he said he was going to lift all the sanctions in Brazil. So I fully support it, although I think of course, it hurts my business, right?
Yeah, I know, and I'm sorry to hear that. Hey, maybe there's a way that Mug Club and what you're doing, Mr. Figueiredo, can pair. We can put a poll out there. We probably could use some Brazilian Portuguese people coming on over, giving them access to more content. Let me ask you this: what is your specific relationship with Justice Moraes? Because he is at the center of a lot of this, and the more I was doing research, it kept coming back to the same person.
Well, he is the de facto dictator of Brazil. So I don't have a relationship with him other than I was a journalist on the mainstream media. Okay, I was on prime time. I used to have sometimes more viewers than Fox News on prime time in the U.S. It's like I'm talking about millions of people watching every day on TV, regular cable TV, cable news TV. The show that I was on was considered the #1 political show in the country for a long time. So, and one day on December 30th, 2022, so after Lula's election, I woke up with the order of cancellation of my Brazilian passport, which was unheard of. The ban of all my social media in Brazil. You can access my social media if you're not in Brazil or if you're using a VPN, not in Brazil. My YouTube channel had like 1 million people, over 1 million people there. My Twitter account, 1.4 million people, just to give you an idea, and all other platforms. And one day I woke with everything blocked, and plus all my assets in Brazil, all my assets and bank accounts were frozen. Plus he issued a fine every time I stated any fake news, which I believe I've never did in my life, but depends on what you think fake news are. So that's my relationship with him, and I have been like that for a year and a half now.
Well, and let me ask you this, because you said de facto dictator, Moraes. Now, he's a Supreme Court judge. So the president there, former criminal, until the Supreme Court said, we're not going to do that anymore. Lula. What's the relationship then between Moraes and Lula? It sounds to me like you're saying he might be in a greater position of control than the president.
Oh, he definitely is. And it's not me saying that, right? Elon Musk said that he pretty much controls Lula. And it's interesting because a few months ago, the Lula's party supported a bill in the U.S., in Brazilian Senate, saying that giving some limitations to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court justices went nuts, and they started sending messages, WhatsApp messages, to journalists on mainstream media saying, look, we allow him to go back to power. So he was like, he can't turn against us. We defend the democracy. We guarantee his election. So they brag about it. They brag about the fact that they brought him to power. So and if you look at the Twitter files, Brazil, which they were released last week, it's undeniable that Moraes played a key role censoring conservatives and therefore favoring Lula's election, because And even when I was on TV, I used to get orders from the court saying, you can't say this, you can't say that, you can't say that. Like, and this is unheard of.
Right.
I couldn't say that Lula was unconvicted because this is a little. It was just us being smartasses in a sense,
Sure.
because he was convicted and then he was not found not guilty. He was unconvicted by the court.
Right.
I couldn't say he was an ally of Venezuelan dictatorship. I couldn't say he was an ally of the Nicaragua dictator. So I couldn't say stuff like that on air by court orders.
Wow.
And we saw that was happening in an even broader scale on all social media. Twitter was the one that we have access to the files, but it was happening on all social media.
Can I ask you something? Because you were on television for a very long time. That means you were obviously broadcasting when Bolsonaro was in office. And you've talked about these orders coming straight to you. Any of them ever come from Bolsonaro, the supposed fascist, saying you can't say that if you were critical of him or any of his colleagues ever?
No, I actually used to criticize Bolsonaro a lot. A lot of my viewers didn't like it, but I think it's part of my job. But I tried to be fair with him, which is unique in the mainstream media. Like here in the U.S., you can criticize Donald Trump, but you don't need to lie about it. And but the other journalists, I mean, the mainstream media in Brazil is not just as bad as in the U.S., it's way worse than in the U.S. Mm-hmm. So, and the amount of lies they spread against Bolsonaro is unbelievable, and most of them were proven fake news,
right?
Like false,
yes,
throughout the time. And Bolsonaro never did anything to them. It's like to the point that some people said he deserved to die, just like we saw in the U.S. with Trump. The same thing in Brazil. We had mainstream newspapers with a column saying, "Well, I wish Bolsonaro was dead," and stuff like that. And nothing happened to no one.
Right.
And to be fair, and I have to be absolutely, I've been in this game for a long time, and I've been in this game before Bolsonaro and during the first run of the Workers' Party, the Socialist Party, Lula and Dilma in power, and I criticized them heavily without fear. And now in Brazil, everyone is terrified. I mean, members of Congress, whatever is left on the press, even the more moderate leftist journalists, they're terrified of criticizing Moraes. Not Lula. We can criticize Lula. We cannot criticize Moraes or the Supreme Court. That's called an attack on the institutions, an attack on democracy, and spreading misinformation. And therefore, although there's nothing on the Brazilian law against that, they can throw you in prison, and they have.
Yeah. Well, it's really scary. I mean, in South America, sort of, coups happen all the time. It's just kind of pick a country and pick a span of 5 years. It doesn't matter if you're going to go Colombia this year, you're going to go Chile, you're going to go Bolsonaro, you're going to go Brazil, or is what they would try and say. I know you guys had one in the 1960s, I believe, and I know there were sort of semi-coups since then. That happens quite a bit. And Brazil is an interesting place because it seemed like it was going one direction. And like I said, I know a lot of Brazilians. Every single one of them was a very big Bolsonaro supporter. I knew one who wasn't, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. You may know him, was a journalist. And I would be curious to see his thoughts now because I asked him about Lula. I didn't ask him about Moraes. Let me ask you this. How does one, because there are 11 justices, right? If I'm not mistaken, there on your Supreme Court in Brazil? There are 11.
Correct.
How does one person, one single justice, I mean, this is the reason that your passport was revoked. This is the reason that your bank accounts were frozen, that your social media, that you were deplatformed. This is the person involved with the Twitter files, right? It all goes back to Moraes. How does one, going after that magazine, how does one justice, when there are 11, have that kind of unilateral power to get accounts removed and entire platforms?
Well, he has a lot of support. And just so you know, it's very rare to see a jiu-jitsu practitioner that's leftist. That's very rare.
It's very rare. Yes.
It's very rare.
You know why? Because they're individuals.
I know.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
They live in personal strength and solving things, and it's very interesting.
Yeah.
But that said, Moraes has a lot of support, and he has support, global support. I mean, really global support, and to the fact that the United States directly interfered on Brazilian elections. And this is not a conspiracy theory. That's on mainstream media, that Joe Biden sent the Secretary of Defense, the Director of CIA, the Advisor for International Affairs to Brazil to exert pressure on public officials, including generals, including politicians, including bureaucrats, to not contest the electoral result if Lula won. So, and Biden was the first one to recognize Lula immediately after he won the election.
Right.
And that's direct interference. And we have reports of that on mainstream media. It puzzles me. Actually, doesn't, but I'll pretend it does.
Yeah.
That it puzzles me why the Department of State is supporting a guy that's very anti-American, because all Lula's policy was they were very anti-American.
Sure.
Lula is pro-Hamas. Lula is pro-China like crazy. He is pro-Iran. We've been docking Iranian warships in the Brazilian ports. He's pro-Venezuela. He's pro the drug cartels in South America. He's undermining the dollars on the BRICS. He's trying to make the yuan the international currency for trades. Like, why do the Biden administration support that? It's almost like they hate America.
Yes. It's almost like it's the same party of people who supported Chavez. It's almost like it defies reason. Yeah, Nick, you have a question.
And he said, if I'm following this right, Lula is sort of he's sort of behind the scenes controlling Moraes.
Moraes is the one behind the scenes. He's a Supreme Court justice.
Oh, okay.
Lula is the president.
It was sort of the same dynamic, I thought, as Biden being controlled by.
Yeah, by
the So Lula and his allies, they appointed. Yeah. So Moraes was appointed by the vice president of Dilma Rousseff, which was the successor of Lula's party. The vice president, Dilma, was impeached for defrauding public accounts, so she was impeached. And then this guy, Temer, which was more of a centrist guy, he took office, and then he appointed Moraes. So if you take out of 11, 9 were appointed by the left in Brazil. Wow. So that's why they can do whatever they want.
So it's just, it is rare, by the way, like you talk about too with jiu-jitsu guys. That's kind of the community. I think that's why we have a significant viewership in Brazil. We're going to start translating some of our content to Portuguese because, obviously appearing on Joe Rogan and being involved to some degree in the mixed martial arts community. It's a very strong sort of rugged individualist community. I see a real populist groundswell, or have been for a while there with Bolsonaro, and it was very surprising to me to see this shift, and it just made me very aware that it seems like it's a shift in spite of public sentiment, not as a byproduct of it. And I see a lot of the similarities, with what they've done. They just accuse Bolsonaro and people on the right of being exactly what they are. They accuse him of being a fascist while they silence journalists and try and get people removed. They accuse him of not being willing to relinquish power while they effectively appoint a shadow government, right? That's what they've done here in the United States. They've said Donald Trump is a fascist. Fascists don't typically lower your taxes and give you more access to firearms if you're a law-abiding citizen. But
they arrest your political opponents.
Right. Exactly. That's what we see.
Moraes guy is a black belt in corruption is what he's got.
That's exactly what he is. A lot of similarities. And yeah, I think a big reason that they would all hate America is because the idea of America would be the safeguards, checks, and balances to act as a stand against corruption. And of course, they want to destroy those checks and balances while demanding that people recognize and respect the institutions that they falsely prop up.